Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Ontario Cryptids. I'm really glad you're here because this week I've got 4 incredible encounter stories to share, each one more fascinating than the last. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss another upload. It really helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more amazing stories each week. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, consider becoming a channel member. Members get exclusive perks like shoutouts, early viewings, and our weekly members-only chat, where we dive even deeper into the strange and unexplained. You can check out all the details by clicking on the join button below. Oh, and if you have an encounter story of your own, we'd love to hear it. Send your stories to Ontariocryptids@gmail.com. Now sit back and relax and let's get into this week's mysterious encounters. Let me start off by introducing myself. My name is Joshua. My fiance and I are building a barn dominium in Pittsburgh, Texas, way out in the rural country. We have 10 acres, but we're surrounded by thousands of rural land, water, and deep woods. We're getting a lot of strange things happening around the house at night, like rocks being thrown and rolling down the roof, screams that sound like a female, and then some sounds like extremely large males. I have a hardwood tree probably 5 inches around that's probably 20 feet tall that was snapped in half across from my deer stand. Lots of, I guess what you'll call them, tree knocks or rock knocks, whoops or yells. There's obviously something going on out there. I work out of town a lot and my fiance is here by herself a lot with 2 kids. Things are getting kind of eerie at night. On average, there's usually 4 of us here. Me and my fiance and the 2 kids. We do have company over occasionally and they have heard quite a few things at nighttime. Usually we're just outside. We've got a big back porch with a pond in the backyard and then there's thousands of acres of rural land behind us. There's been incidents of something slamming, I would assume it's a fist or something, into the house one night. But it seems like since I put out deer feeders and hunting stands that everything is moved into fast-forward motion. I guess I'm starting to feel like maybe it or they are kind of angry at me for maybe hunting what they consider their land. Most of the activities we hear and receive is late evening, middle of the night. There's been some early evening, right as the sun is setting or before the sun is setting. We've heard branches and trees breaking. There's been pebbles thrown on the house that roll down the roof. I guess it hasn't really been too chilly until right now. Today's the coldest day of the year. Last night was the most activity that we've had. It was late September that I was visiting a friend who lived at the edge of the Chautauqua State Forest. Chautauqua State Forest is probably not listed on the New York Forest Registry because it is technically a Seneca Nation reservation property, located near Jamestown, New York on a map, or Lilydale. It would be the forest that borders this property going to the north. It is about an hour south of Buffalo. My friend and I had gotten up early to hike one of the nature trails that go through the park. This part of western New York is about an hour south of Buffalo and in between the Seneca Nation. The tourist season of the summer had ended and it was not yet deer hunting season, but the foliage was still thick. My friend and I started on the trail early around 6:30 a.m. in the morning and it was still dusk outside and the sun had just began to rise. After about 20 minutes into our hike, we come to what looks like a marsh-like environment with flattened trees and some open spaces. We had stopped to survey the area, just looking around at how beautiful the scenery was. I would like to say that at this point that my friend, who is also a professional photographer, wished he had brought his camera, and in a few moments I wished he had as well. As we stood there, we got the strange sense that we were being watched. I thought this strange considering the remoteness of the area and how early it was. As I turned around to see what was behind us, we heard a movement in the bushes. At this point, I thought it was a bear. Bigfoot had not entered my mind at all. We both began to make a lot of noise and talking loud enough so that if it was a bear, it would run off instead of charging. After a while, we realized that it was not a bear or any other animal because with all the noise we were making, whatever it was in the thickets had not moved. At this point, we thought it had to be a human, but as we neared the thickets about 50 feet from where we were standing, we heard a heavy breathing and saw through the thicket what appeared to be a large, dark form, either laying down or squatting. My friend became very frightened, and even at this point, Bigfoot had not entered either of our thoughts. My friend urged me to continue down the original trail and back to where we had started. We were already deep into the woods and had at least another good 20 minutes of brisk walking or running if whatever was in the bushes decided to follow. As we started down the trail, whatever it was in the bushes darted behind the nearest tree and began to follow us. After a few minutes of this, it became aggravating, so my friend and I thought that we would stop and hide behind the nearest tree so that we can finally see what this thing would do. As I peered out from behind the side of this tree, what I saw was something that I will never forget. When I stared at the tree and bushes that this thing was hiding behind, and I will say not well, and what appeared to be at the 6-foot level of a branch was a dark, hairy shoulder and part of a massive forearm. At this point, I knew exactly what I was looking at, and it was at least a 7-foot tall Sasquatch, and with all my nerve, I tried to get my friend to see it from my angle. When my friend moved over to my side to get a look at this creature, it had moved just enough to see its torso, and that was all my friend needed to see, and he took off. I was left standing there wondering if the reports of these things chasing people were true, but all it did was stand there waiting for me to make my move. This was the point that I was scared the most. I didn't know what to do, so I began to talk to it out loud and said, "We are not here to hurt you. We are just moving through." I said this in a calming voice despite the fact that my nerves were as frayed as they could be. I started down the trail in a calm walking gait, and this Sasquatch kept right up with me about 75 feet behind me, always staying just out of my line of view. It stopped following me about half a mile from the end of the trail. When I caught up with my friend, he was too shaken up to talk about it and has never mentioned it again. I have been back to the area since this incident, and my friend will not go into the woods by himself and only with a great number of people. I would like to add that there was no smell associated with this sighting and no vocalization, only heavy breathing and what sounded like a low guttural growl and some form of what sounded to me to be lip smacking. On the 8th of November of 2024, I was in the backyard in the driveway of my ex-wife's house. I was standing beside my truck, putting away some tools as we were talking. I don't know what made me turn around and look up the driveway. As I did, I saw a tall, hairy figure walking behind a duplex behind a garage. The space between the building is approximately 20 to 25 feet. I only saw the figure for a few seconds. I turned to my ex-wife and said, "Did you see what I just saw?" She asked, "What did you see?" I said, "I believe I saw a Bigfoot." Her response was, "You finally saw it." she meant that she has had several encounters with this thing over the years. I walked across the street to where it was headed into the Laurentian Gardens in hopes to see it walking into the woods. I stood in an area where I could see where it might have went. I listened and looked for several minutes, but I didn't hear or see anything else. I left knowing that I saw something, and I just left it at that. About 4 hours later, my ex-wife called and said that there are 2 roofers working behind her house. My daughter's boyfriend, who is a Hispanic, heard them talking in Spanish. They were saying that they just saw a monster. This confirmed to me that I really did see one. This area has had many sightings throughout the years. Several people have seen it, like my ex-wife, my daughter, my sister, and now me. During the summer of 2006, my father and I took one of our yearly vacations to northern Maine. Specifically, our favorite destination spot is Jackman, Maine. We don't hunt, we just enjoy the nature of the area and moose watching. The area is littered with logging roads. I mean, not just 1 or 2. There are about 24 roads that are accessible from off of Route 201 north of Jackman. Anyway, off of these logging roads are multiple side roads that web for large distances into the Maine wilderness. Most of the time, there is no one on these roads unless a rogue logging truck, hunter, or tourist decides to venture into these woods. This particular night, my father and I ordered a pizza and ate while on a logging road. We ventured about 10 to 15 minutes into the woods and ate our dinner. The sun went down and it was the new moon, so there was no light in the woods at all. We use a large flashlight to see animals at night. This was the only source of light other than the headlights. As it got dark, I began using a predator call to see if we could attract a bear. This particular call made the sound of a rabbit in distress. Over a 40-minute period, I listened to the noises in the woods and heard nothing but the occasional rodent complaining about the noise we were making. By this time, it was around 10 p.m. My father and I decided to drive about 3 miles down the road in the direction of Route 201. We turned the car around on the logging road, and again, I made the predator call. I heard nothing. Usually when I make the call, the whole woods come to life with sounds, but this particular night, it was dead silent. The complete darkness was nerve-wracking as I could not even see my hand in front of my face. Furthermore, the silence was deafening because my ears were ringing. Totally uncharacteristic. We waited about 20 minutes before driving back down the road to see if anything had come by. We came around a corner and onto the straight road where we were sitting. Something was in the road there. At this point, the temperature was dropping through the 50s, and whatever was in the road had steam coming off of it. As we got closer, I pointed the spotlight onto the road to find a dead rabbit with its stomach torn open, laying in the road. We turned the car around again, and I told my father that I wanted to wait and see if the animal comes back to take the rabbit. Based on how it was still steaming, I figured that this was a recent kill, and whatever it was that dropped it was nearby and was spooked when we approached in the car. We waited roughly 5 minutes. I listened as closely as possible to the noises in the woods, but heard nothing. I decided to begin using the predator call to see if anything would come around to collect the dead rabbit in the road. I made the call every 2 minutes, listening to the noises in between. 10 minutes after I began using the call, I started hearing a dull whistling sound to my right. Each time I made the call, the whistling got louder and louder. It was at this time that I realized it was not whistling, but it was birds chirping. With each call of the predator call, the chirping got louder and louder. I realized at this point that something was walking on the ground and disturbing the birds. The chirping increased in volume for another 10 minutes. That was when I started hearing the rustling of whatever was walking in the woods. We had no weapons, a sedan rent-a-car, and we had no way of seeing into the thick woods that lined the sides of the road, and we had no business being back there. My curiosity won the battle, and I told my father that I wanted to stay and wait. I increased the predator call sound to once a minute. After each sound, there would be silence, then a very deliberate movement towards me. I will say this, though, again, I don't have hunting experience. Whatever was walking in the woods did not rustle the leaves on the ground. It was taking steps as if it was lifting its feet up and putting them down. It was not a moose. I know what a moose sounds like from watching them for years, and this movement did not match that noise. Whatever it was very big because I could hear branches snapping off the trees and leaves falling once the branches snapped. The footsteps stopped after about 5 minutes. At this point, I knew that whatever it was, it had to be within 30 feet of me. The flashlight was useless to see into the woods because of how thick the shrubs and undergrowth was. I increased the predator call to once every 30 seconds. Nothing. I wondered at this point what happened. The bird stopped chirping. The footstep sounds were gone. The rabbit lay bleeding in the road. It was silent once again. I figured I'd tried using the call once more. I sounded it. Within a second of the end of the call, I heard a very loud guttural grunt growl in the woods to my right. I told my father to put his hands on the keys and get ready to get us out of there. My eyes started watering, and I started to shake because I knew whatever it was, it had to be huge to make that sound. Again, I held up the predator call to make the sound again. Right after I finished, there was a huge grunt in the woods. The best way to describe it is a mixture between a deep, raspy cough and a shrieking whoop sound. I had never heard that sound before. The footsteps moved closer at this point, and I knew the animal had to be within 15 feet of me. However, I saw nothing in the woods when I used the flashlight. My father turned on the headlights to watch the rabbit. Nothing. I used a predator call one more time, even though I wanted to get out of there, being that I was only within 8 feet of the edge of the woods, and it wouldn't take much for something to jump out and get me. I finished the call, and at this point, a deafening growl came out of the woods to my right. I pointed a light to see a large birch tree begin leaning towards the car, as if it was being pushed. My father started the car, and we flew out of there as fast as we could. This is what was strange. We came up to the spot 3 miles down the road that we were sitting at before. Right in this area, a large rock about the size of a sedan tire rim was sitting right in the middle of the road. This was not there when we were sitting there in this spot about an hour before. We drove carefully and quickly around it. We made it back to the main road and went back to the hotel. The next day, my father and I went back to the spot. The rock was no longer in the road. In fact, it was gone. We came around the corner where the rabbit was sitting. It was gone. There was no blood either. The birch tree was bent over. There were no footprints as it was too dry. The only thing that indicated that anything had happened was the grass matted down on this side of the road. The area that was pushed down was about the size of a pickup truck, so something big was sitting in this spot. That night, my father and I didn't go back on the logging road as we were both scared. However, we pulled over to the side of Route 201 to watch a moose and heard the most haunting sound I've ever heard in my life. In the direction of the previous night's event, I heard a massive cry or howl that echoed through the valleys. It had the tone of a foghorn, but I could tell this was definitely some sort of animal or human making this sound. I've never forgotten that noise. I've since found that noise that I hear matches closely to many of the videos of the howls in the woods of supposed Bigfoots. Could the animal that was in the woods that night have been a bear? Absolutely. However, the grunting and movement did not match the sounds a bear makes. This seemed intelligent, as if it didn't want to hurt us, but it wanted to scare us in hopes of making us leave. This seemed intelligent, as if it didn't want to hurt us, but it wanted to scare us in hopes of making us leave. And it worked, but it took a display of strength pushing the birch tree to scare us off. And that will wrap up another episode of Ontario Cryptids. I hope you enjoyed these 4 incredible encounter stories. Some truly fascinating experience that reminds us just how much mystery still hides out there in the wilderness, and if you poke enough, you might get a response. A big thank you as well to all my current channel members. Thank you guys so much for your support. I truly appreciate it. And if you haven't joined yet and want to consider becoming a channel member so that you can enjoy the special perks and especially our exclusive chats that we have on Monday nights. Also, don't forget to hit that like button, the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell so you'll never miss another upload. And remember, if you've got a story of your own, short or long, we'd love to feature it on the channel. Send your stories over to ontariocryptids@gmail.com. And lastly, have yourselves a great weekend, and we'll see you next time right here on Ontario Cryptids.